Welcome back to the Here for the Truth podcast. My name is Joel Rafidi. I got my co-host Erasmus with me as always. Today, very excited for this conversation with Brad Skistimas. Is that the correct pronunciation, do you think?
I don't know. I think so. He mentions it in the episode, so we'll know for sure.
He's Greek, right?
I don't know. I've never had this conversation. I mean, not every name that ends with a vowel and an S is Greek, but maybe that's a question we should ask. Like, what's your
Yeah.
background?
I can't
Anyways,
believe, can't believe you never asked that question. He goes by the artist name Five Times August. Some of you may have heard of him, may have heard his music. An incredible salt of the earth guy who's been putting out incredible songs, well produced, well written, amazing video clips. He's been probably one of the most prominent independent quote unquote protest artists since 2020. Millions of views, across YouTube and plays are among different kind of streaming platforms. This was a really, really powerful conversation, about art, about the creative process, about the music industry, about the artists that didn't speak up, about, the fake rebels, about the programming in music. I think you guys are going to get a lot of value out of it for sure. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If you get the chance, please rate, review, subscribe wherever you're listening. If you get value, drop us a comment. All our videos are solely hosted on our website. We're not on YouTube. The full episodes aren't anywhere else but hereforthetruth.com. So, I mean, if you've only ever listened to this podcast and you want to see what we look like, maybe head to hereforthetruth.com and watch this podcast for a change. Let us know. Anyway, appreciate you all so much. We're gonna kick this one off with a song of Brad's called Joe. Then we're gonna get into the conversation.
You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Erasmus.
I just have one thing to say. Hang on here.
Hey Joe, where you going with that gun in your hand? You'll strip the right from an American, but leave it locked and loaded for the Taliban. Hey Joe, where you going with that blood on your hands? I heard you say it was on the news. You're the president, the buck stops with you. Now there ain't no mommy and there ain't no dad, 'cause you wrapped them up in the American flag. 13 kids but you stopped the war, and there ain't no sense going back for more. 'Cause hey Joe, we did it, 81 million votes. Hey Joe, where you going? Why you moving so slow? They'll prop you up on the TV screen, but forget your job. What flavor ice cream is that? And hey Joe, where you going? Do you even know? Come on man, not a joke. Here's the deal, the country's broke. You ain't no leader and you ain't the boss. You wander around like you're fucking lost. So check your watch, turn your back, set us up for the big attack. 'Cause hey Joe, we did it, 81 million votes. Hey Joe, so where you going with that gun in your hand? And hey Joe, where you going with all that blood on your hands?
Powerful there by Five Times August. Brad Skistimas. He has appeared on the Fox Business Channel as an expert, do-it-yourself indie artist. featured in Billboard magazine, performing songwriter, guitar player, People magazine, and USA Today. He was the first completely unsigned act to have an album distributed in Walmart stores nationwide, with 2007's The Independent. His music has been featured on many popular TV shows, commercials, and films, and tour dates have supported some of the nation's top acts. In early 2021, 5 Times August began releasing a series of protest songs taking aim at COVID-era regulations, the Biden administration, Justin Trudeau, as well as Anthony Fauci, with the hit song Sad Little Man, which reached #1 on several Amazon and Apple Music charts. Several of his music videos for these tracks have been suppressed and censored on social media platforms like YouTube and Facebook, but despite the restrictions, the videos have been viewed millions of times. He performed his song Silent War on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. for 35,000 attendees at the Defeat the Mandates rally on January 23rd, 2022. And more recently, even had the honor of singing the national anthem for Dr. Ben Carson and President Donald Trump. In November 2022, he released the full-length album Silent War, a compilation featuring all of the recent protest singles, and the album reached as high as #5 on Amazon's best-selling albums, sitting between mainstream artists such as Taylor Swift and Bruce Springsteen. The album also reached #1 on Amazon and Apple Music's singer-songwriter and alternative charts. In 2023, he signed with the new record label, Based Records, to release the single Ain't No Rock and Roll, calling out all mainstream musicians and bands that didn't speak out against government tyranny in recent years. Brad, thank you so much for being here for The Truth, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Nah, it's an absolute pleasure. At the beginning there, we played his song Joe, which comes along with an awesome video, which I think you self-produce as well. I love the artistry that pours through, and the inspiration is so obvious, man. One way we always like to kick these off is I want to dive a little bit deeper into your personal hero's journey. Like, what kind of led you down this path of like blending activism with artistry and having your songs being fueled by real shit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I started 5 Times August right out of high school in 2001. So the name and the music has been around for a long time. I was 18 years old. And I always wrote about what was important to me. And when you're 18, you know, when you're going through when you think you're an adult and you're going through relationships, you know, they're all breakup songs. They were love songs. And you know, that's what I was focused on. And now I'm married with 3 kids, and my perspective on life is more seasoned and experienced. And, you know, for a long time, I was just writing and recording pop songs and just trying to create something that, you know, connects with people and brings people together. I always liked that about music. And I never bothered interjecting any sort of political statement. I liked that music brought people together, and I sort of stayed out of it. I had a lot of friends in the industry across the spectrum from all different kinds of beliefs, and you know, I just sort of just behaved myself. And I think, you know, come 2020, a lot of my naive perspective on life sort of just kind of fell by the wayside. It's sort of like one thing after another of realizing like the world isn't what it is, and people aren't who they are. I think that was mainly what it really was about, was like realizing like, oh, I thought there was this baseline understanding that we all knew, like, you don't believe what you see on TV, you question what's in the media, you don't trust politicians. And all of a sudden, all these people are doing just that. And I'm sitting there going, really? And 2020 kind of knocked me out creatively. I didn't know what to say. I didn't, as an artist, but I was looking around at the world that was being created for my kids. I have 3 kids now, my oldest being 12. And, you know, just thinking about the world that was being created for them, and you know, all the government tyranny that was taking place and is still taking place. And just thinking, you know, I don't want them to look back on this time and be like, you know, where were you, Dad? Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you fight for my future? And I realized I was in a unique position. I had a platform to speak, and a lot of my musical heroes weren't using their platform to speak up. You know, a lot of my rock and roll heroes. As you mentioned in the bio, I wrote the song Ain't No Rock and Roll, which is directly pointed at all of my heroes, musical heroes from growing up, saying, where were you? You kowtowed to the government. You called us enemies for not obeying. Like, that's the most anti-rock and roll thing you could be. So a lot has changed in my brain over these last 4 years, and it was already warming up to that. I mean, my oldest was injured by his early childhood vax when he was a baby, and so we had already gone down that rabbit hole. I'm jumping around quite a bit because just but that's kind of how I got here. Was 20 leading up to 2020, it was sort of like my whole perspective had changed, and I realized I didn't have an option. I needed to say something. And so I wrote a song called God Help Us All, which is kind of like a long 5-minute song of just me venting, saying, just holding a mirror back up to what was happening in our country and around the world. And when I released that song, I kind of thought that would be my one say on the matter. I thought that, I'll just put this out and get it out and just be done with it and know that I said something. But it just completely changed the trajectory of everything that I was doing at that time, because I, number one, pissed off a whole bunch of my current fan base at the time for saying what I was saying and going against the mainstream narrative and putting lyrics in my songs that they hadn't really ever heard me say before. And while I was losing those fans, I was making this brand new community of listeners saying, thank you so much for saying what you just said. And that let me know I wasn't alone, and let me know I needed to speak up more in my music to let others know that they weren't alone. And so that's sort of what brought me to this moment and has kept me going since early 2021, really.
That's amazing, man. What? Well, first of all, I have this quick question I want to ask. Why 5 times August?
So like I said, so I was 18 when I started 5 times August. I just needed a band name, and my actual name is Brad Skistimas. And I knew, like, I can't go as a solo artist, Brad Skistimas. No one's going to remember Skistimas. So my birthday is August 5th. I wrote down, different names like the August 5 and whatever. And I was like, 5 times August sounds cool. And at that time, the idea was there was like a few one-man bands, out there that were pretty popular, like Dashboard Confessional was like mainly one guy, or like Nine Inch Nails was mainly one guy. So I was like, I'll be that kind of, one-man band kind of thing. So 5 times August came around. It's just sort of derived from my birthday and then lasted all these years. So
That's
awesome, man. Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, the Leo and the entertainment, that definitely connects and makes a lot of sense. I got a question. So how has your engagement and the way your music has been received shifted since before 2020 and post 2020, when you as an artist kind of shifted your perspective? Would you say that you've garnered like more quote unquote success post?
I think it's a different kind of success. What's interesting right now that's happening is it's getting easier. So when I started speaking out, and this goes for, I think, a lot of the handful of artists that spoke out, because it wasn't just me. There's a good little chunk of guys speaking out, mainly indie artists. We got very few mainstream artists just to actually say something, but it felt very alone. We all sort of share this same sort of thing. Like when you first start speaking out, it's scary. You're alone. You're losing fans, losing opportunities. And now over the course of the last 4 years, as slowly sort of the population sort of has woken up more, and certain things that you said 4 years ago have become more accepted now. It's getting easier. So we're actually witnessing the cultural shift in real time, from going from being an outcast and saying something that wasn't accepted to being accepted. And now we have these incredible events happening around the world that are happening. I know we're just talking about Confluence before the show started. Music in Sky is another one. I'll be going to the UK in August for a 3-day festival called Jam for Freedom. And a new avenue has emerged from this that is very exciting. And so it's just a different kind of success when you think about, when I started out, like I was saying, at 18 years old, it was a very traditional mindset of I'm going to get my record label deal and have a hit song on the radio, and I'm going to be on TV and
Win the Grammy.
Yeah, and get the Grammy and everything. And none of that stuff means anything to me anymore.
Yeah.
And, but I actually did become a voting member of the Grammys. And by the time I got that, I didn't even care anymore because I was just so embarrassed by what the industry had come anyway. So it just goes to show you, like, what you think you want in life, by the time maybe you get to that point, you realize like it didn't really mean that much anyways, or maybe you get something different and it's more incredible than you ever could have imagined. And that's where I find myself, is everything that I wanted early on in my career that defined what being successful meant, is completely irrelevant now. Through my journey, I've met my wife, I had my kids, I've grown as a person in ways I never thought. Like, who I am as an artist right now is an artist I never thought that I would be. To be considered a protest artist was never, ever on my radar. But I found myself being this artist that I always sort of looked at from afar, going like, oh, I'll never be that kind of, rebel or whatever it means. But being a rebel has, that definition alone has changed. So, I have a different perspective on what being successful means. And the relationship that I have with the people that are listening is different as well. And it's on another level.
It's amazing what happens when you tune inwards and you know yourself and you make a single choice. And in essence, for you, you created that one song. And then what happened after that? We just had Ian Smith on and the episode release, and he was the gym owner in New Jersey who was just like, no, we're not closing. Like, we made that decision. And then what comes from after that? What does that do to your character? And what does that do to the trajectory of your life? So, I mean, I just have like the utmost respect for that courage. And then to stick with it and to see what unfolds. Because like you said, you may have an idea of like, oh, this is how I want my life to be. But never in your wildest dreams, like, it turns out like the way you thought it would. It ends up being something so much more rich and so much more beautiful. I mean, I could say the same thing for even Joel, and I could say the same thing. Like, oh, let's just jump on a podcast on Zoom and press record and start talking, and then see what happens. And then 2 years later, 3 years later, like the richness of the relationships that are built and the connections. It's something I almost can't even put words to.
Well, and I think it's so much realer. And also, like, I think it feels so much greater because it's not propped up by anything else or anyone else. You know what I mean? It's just, it's so tangible. Like, even you as an artist now, like, you're not reliant on press or media or, having to have favor with any kind of institution or anything. Like, it's real, and no one can take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I love so much about being on this side of my career, is that I know what I've done is real. That was part of that first song that I recorded, God Help Us All, it was just me and acoustic guitar playing in my bedroom, getting back to something that, recording music in my bedroom was something I hadn't done since the early days of my career. And I was just sort of like, I'm going to give people the most raw thing I could give at this moment, because I just feel like there's so much fluff and fakeness right now, and it resonated in a way, and that's what's so great about the community, is everybody's here because of their integrity and their just belief in who they are and what's right and true, and it's not based on much more than that. The success of like the album coming out, and it being up there next to Taylor Swift and Bruce Springsteen was really like, I did that with a $0 budget in marketing, right? Next to two people who have a machine behind them. And that's not just me, I made the music, but that's people. That's people voting with their dollars. And what an incredible example of what can happen and how we can change things when we really get behind these ideas and values that are important to us. We can really change things.
Yeah. Totally, man. And I feel like I've said this before, but like for everyone that really stood in integrity during that peak kind of period, I just feel like those decisions seem so much weightier in terms of the ripple forward and the ripple into, the future and eternity. Like everyone, when I consider like, back then who was like, speaking out and like was nervous about the repercussions, but still garnered the courage. Like I look at them, their lives, their paths now, like it feels like they've leaped forward in 4 years, what normally would be like 10 or 15 years kind of work.
Yeah. And it also shows you that, whatever this battle is, that we're winning, one person at a time, I think, because all of those people that faced that moment, that were, being removed from social media and attacked and slandered, they're still here. And not only are they here, but their audience has grown.
Yeah.
And you see more and more people, it might not be as fast as we all desire, but it's happening, and nobody goes back the other direction.
No.
Nobody comes across to the side of the truth and goes, you know what? No, I was wrong. It is the government that has my best interest in mind, and the big pharmaceutical companies. Nobody goes that direction. They just try. I think the problem is most people have such a hard time accepting that reality that so much bad is happening. It takes a long time to open up their minds to what the reality of the world is.
I think it's amazing that we all survived so many winters of death. I mean, really, I'm still amazed that we all did and we made it through.
Yeah, right. What are we on our? We'll be on our fourth one.
I think we got through our fourth winter of death. Yeah. What was it like in the early period in terms of, because I'm always curious, like your relationship to your fellow musicians, like the text messages you got, the WhatsApp messages you got, like the emails or the in-person conversations, like what was that like? And have any people from that time that maybe like ostracized you, have they kind of come back into the mix, sent you a message, said, hey, listen, I was wrong. I'm curious how that experience has been for you.
It was, I think, as far as like industry peers goes, most just sort of shut me off without really saying anything. I did have a friend who, said, I'm going to have to unfriend you. You're saying really dangerous things, and, to be called dangerous by people that are supposed to know who you are and know where your heart is, and have sat and had long conversations with you, over the course of years, where everybody had these relationships, right? That were supposed to have meant something. And all of a sudden, one by one, they would just fall away, whether it was they just closed the door on you and didn't say anything, or they sent you, a really mean message, which I got a lot of those messages from longtime fans, because like I said, I started 5 Times August at 18 years old. So
how old are you now, just for context, right?
I'm 40. And so, I had leading up to the COVID era, 2 decades worth of, career and relationships and fans that, hadn't seen this sort of side to me, this dangerous side to me, whatever it meant to them. But it was kind of surprising to, I think a lot of my naivete was that we could have a conversation about it, and to see those doors close so instantaneously by people to just, I said what was important to me. Right. And the conversation wasn't like, wow, Brad, like, why did you say that? Like, what's going on that would make you say those sort of things? It was just sort of like, I can't believe that you would say those things, and I'm going to stop talking to you now. It's like the door shut when I was like, hey, the door's always open, right? There was never any anger or resentment coming from my side of things. Mm-hmm. I was just speaking up for what was important to me. But yeah, I mean, have I had anybody come back around? Not necessarily. To get those words, I'm sorry, I was wrong, I don't think, most people have it in them. You have to realize most most people that era, if you were on that side of things, it brought out the worst in you. You called family and friends, dear family and friends, murderers. You went so far to cut them out of your life, call them dangerous murderers, dangerous. Just that in itself, you're a dangerous murderer, right? Who wants to be called that by a brother or a sister or a neighbor or a friend that you've been friends with for 20 years? So I did have that particular friend actually, continuing on them as an example. They did write me right before Thanksgiving a few years ago, just to say, hey, I hope you're doing well, which I think is as good as you're going to get in that sort of realm of apology. So,
Yeah.
but it's few and far between,
Yeah, I hear you, man. I'll get like a random text sharing like some like irrelevant piece of information from someone I haven't heard from in like a few years, or a like on a Facebook post and I haven't heard anything, or a little message, but nothing like, oh, hey, like everything you shared in 2020, 2021, like I unfollowed you, or I thought you were horrible, but now my views have changed. It's just like, hey, let me just creep back into the picture in this very obscure way. But hey, man, they're doing their thing. We're doing our thing. But I've had a few reconciliations that were deeper than that, which was nice. But
that's good. I think that there's different layers to it. I think our personal relationships are one thing, right? And each one of those is going to mean different things to us, and how you reconcile those is to each their own. But then there's layers that go up. There's people in the public eye, people in the media that enabled that world, a world where people were getting pepper sprayed first, in the streets, a world where people were being pushed to the ground and arrested and, told they couldn't go grocery shopping if they didn't comply, and everything that went with it, right? It was a really ugly time. And there are people who had a specific responsibility, I think, to, tell us what was real and true that didn't. They just played along with it. For instance, in my case, in my industry, is all those rebel rock stars, right? But then we had news pundits in particular, and those people, and all the way up to Washington and politicians around the globe. There needs to be some sort of accountability. Like that's why I continue to speak about it right now. Like, I have a big problem with the idea that the world could just go through what it just went through and then just be like, it was a few years ago, let's just move on, right? Yeah. That's why you don't really get the apology. You get those random messages from people, because in their mind, that was a while ago.
Oh, yeah.
We've all moved on from then. And I'm like, that was a pretty big deal. Can we talk about what just happened and not just pretend it didn't happen? So hopefully we get there,
What do you think is the dissonance with like the projection of the rebel rock star? Then all of a sudden, freedom's obviously being inhibited in the most intense kind of way, and they kind of disappear, and that persona just falls away. Like, is it always persona? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. I think, that's what my song Ain't No Rock and Roll is all about. It's the idea that it really didn't exist. It was just a marketing gimmick, to have to go back. I mean, I've had so many people say this, and this is where it came from, but it started becoming harder to listen to the music that I loved by certain people, knowing that they, enabled that world.
Which bands or artists, I guess, disappointed you most, like that you were like really into?
Oh man, I mean, there's just so many of them, but there's just that group of 60s protest songwriters. We had Neil Young drawing a line in the sand over Spotify and misinformation, which he just came back out to say that he's going back on Spotify, which is insane. It really shows you the backbone of the whole thing, because he made this big fluff. Right? There's dangerous misinformation out there. Joe Rogan is killing people. You can have Joe Rogan or me. I'm taking my music off Spotify. Right? 2 years later, Joe Rogan has a better deal now. He's on more platforms, Apple, YouTube, Amazon. And what does Neil Young do? Is he taking his music off of Apple, Amazon, and YouTube? No. He's just going to put his that dangerous misinformation he was really upset about still there, by the way. And it's going to be in more places now. But what's he going to do about it? Oh, he'll just put it back on Spotify, right? And that right there, really hits the nail on the head about the state of rock and roll. And so, to me, I think a lot of it has to do with, especially in the mainstream avenue of music, is you have contracts and managers and a lot of people telling these artists, what their message is.
Yeah.
And it's very crafted. It's a machine. That's why you saw mainly only indie guys speaking out only over the last few years, because we're not tethered to anything other than what we want to say. And, that's sort of been a good thing. But it really revealed itself, revealed the industry. And it's not just the music industry. It's Hollywood as a whole, the whole mainstream avenue.
Yeah.
It's hard to watch certain movies now. So, I think it's just all a show. That's all it is. And that's all what it's shown itself to be.
Now, a short break from the episode.
What's up, everyone? Music and Sky is happening again, June 20th to 24th in Mendocino, California. This is going to be my 5th time going, along with my wife, Sophie, the 5th time that we're involved, presenting as well. And it's one of my favorite events that exists. Such an incredible group of people that come together. It's so deep. It's so much fun. This one's going to be, I think, bigger and better than ever. It's going to be along a beautiful river in NorCal. More people there, camping, music, great food, inspirational talks. So, if you want to connect with us, because Joel and I will both be there, and a bunch of other previous podcast guests, definitely come join us. I'll have the link down in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely. Not just us, Melissa Sell, Mike Winner, Alex Zek, the Bigglesons, I believe, are going to be there. A bunch of really, really awesome people. And I'd like to announce that I've been working on a new album, and I'm going to be performing my new music at this year's Music and Sky, which I'm very, very excited for as well as getting the chance to, for the first time ever, share the stage with Erasmus, and speak to a live audience, which is going to be an amazing experience and a lot of fun. But, if you're a fan of this podcast, if you want to connect with us in person, we would absolutely love to meet you,
Yeah. Tickets are really affordable too.
Yeah. And with our unique discount code, which we're going to drop in the show notes, you get a further 10% off whatever they're already listed at. So if connecting in person is something that you value, listening to live music, being inspired by amazing speakers, then Music and Sky, is doing absolutely amazing things, for events going forward in the future. We've seen a lot of these events, fall victim to, some of the programming out there, and they become definitely less enjoyable. But I think as times move on, events like Music and Sky, conscious events like that, they might continue to grow, continue to thrive, and it'd be awesome to start building in-person community. So the link is in the show notes to purchase your tickets.
Back to the episode.
Yeah, man. There's so much programming going on through the media, and it's becoming more and more obvious, and more people are becoming aware of it. And they're voting with their dollars in different ways. Like, how do you see the music industry shifting? Like, do you think like mainstream is going to adjust, or is it just going to be like these two paths doing their thing?
I think that it's going to be two paths, because it's much like the news, right? You have a lot of citizen journalists and independent journalists doing their thing, while mainstream media is really, they're getting louder and more blatant with their message and trying to hold on to what they have. And they're not budging with their messaging, right? We haven't seen any shift. In fact, we've seen them double down on it. And so I think you'll see the same thing with entertainment, is you'll have independent film producers and independent artists all doing their thing, and they're creating this whole other, much like the events I'm talking about that are happening now. That stuff didn't exist 3 years ago. Now it exists, and people are going, they're growing. Some of these events are in their second, third year. You know, the attendance is on the rise. Word is spreading, and that's happening over here. Meanwhile, you know, mainstream entertainment is just doing what it does, and you continue to see them lean into it more and more. Because you know, it's like they're wearing less clothes now, and they're dry humping Satan for views and clicks, and it's getting really pathetic, right? Like, it's there for shock value, but really, if you think about it, like, they have to go to those measures to keep people's eyes on it. And you know, they're just, and it's all part of the agenda anyway. But I look at everything now and just sort of ask, you know, why is it being shown to us? Why are we seeing this? What kind of messaging is behind it? And none of it over here interests me anymore. Nothing in the mainstream is interesting to me anymore. All the independent minds that are doing things untethered, that's where I think it's going to eventually shift to, because more people are going to get bored over here, right? How many action movies can you go to where there's 20 lead characters and they're crossing into different universes and there's no real storyline and it's just a whole bunch of CGI? Like, all those movies, those Marvel movies and stuff, like, they're formulaic and they're getting really boring. So eventually you're going to see some indie guy over here who created something without CGI, who had a really beautiful story to tell in the simplest way. And that's what's going to connect with people, because it's going to feel real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen an Avengers movie in my life, just so everyone knows.
Right.
I haven't either.
Well,
Yeah, I don't think I've seen. I've seen clips, but I don't really. You know.
I mean, I've seen other, you know,
in the early days, I watched some
but
of
for
them.
some reason, I didn't.
Yeah.
But I've had this conversation often in the last few years. Like, I think about some of these movies from like the 80s and the 90s, you know, where the technology wasn't there to do the CGI, and just like the storytelling, the plot, like they just don't make movies like that anymore. And it's like, it's sad. You know, I mean, they do in some ways. Obviously, I'm just not saying like big Hollywood studios.
You have to look at the source of the movies, you know, and you've got to look at the minds and the spirits of the people that are producing them. And you know, if there's incongruence there and the shallowness there, then what's going to be created ultimately is going to be shallow as well. But you know, I think the beauty of capitalism is that it's going to create a demand for people that want something richer, something realer, and it's going to attract an audience. One of the bands and artists that I can't listen to anymore is Foo Fighters. Like, Foo Fighters have an incredible catalog of music, but I just cannot listen to a Foo Fighters song because of like Dave Grohl and the vaccine only concerts and what was said. Like, it's just tainted. It's fully tainted.
But Rage Against the Machine too.
Rage Against the Machine.
I only ever knew one Rage Against the Machine song anyway. But with Foo Fighters, like, there's albums worth of good music, you know.
Yeah, and they all have nicknames now. It's like Rage Against the Machine is now Rage for the Machine, and Foo Fighters is now Foo Fighters, and you know, all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of them. I mean, you had Bruce Springsteen. You know, he had segregated audiences. You know, he wouldn't allow unvaccinated to attend his shows. And a big one for me was Paul McCartney, actually, because I love the Beatles, and he was like my idol growing up musically. And then, you know, one day you see a picture of him and he's got his mask on and his beanie and his sleeve rolled up, and he says, "Be cool, get vaxxed." And I'm like, what the hell is that message? Be cool, get vaxxed. Like, talk about informed consent. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
So
Cat Stevens posted multiple photos with fucking, you know, the bandages over his arms.
Yeah, and that's like, when you look back, I could see it even then, but that was a campaign. It's not like they all went and decided to each their own, like, you know what I've got to do is go get my shot and post a picture online. That was a campaign that was coordinated, and that's how the entire entertainment industry works. That's why you see them all get behind the same causes. And when they are on stage accepting an award, their speech is the same thing about climate change or whatever it may be. It's all redundant and repetitive. It just comes from the top down. And in essence, they're all just employees of the labels or the motion picture companies, and they just play their part on and off the screen.
Yeah, we talk about the persona thing before, but do you think like early on in these people's careers that there was something more pure there, and then as they're in the industry, in the business for 2 years, or sorry, 2, 3, 4, 5 decades, and the money's rolling in, that like, you know, those parts of them that were there at the beginning have just taken a seat, you know, they're kind of maybe resting in the unconscious, and these other parts have kind of come forth, and they're just like, I got the good life, sure, tell me what to do. Like there's just a laziness and a complacency, and that kind of comes forth. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that you see it a lot with, there's certain degrees to it. You know, some people approach the industry, I think, entertainment as a whole, as to, I will do whatever it takes to get to where I need to be. I will play the games. I will have the meetings I need to have, the wink meetings in the hotel rooms and whatever it may be.
I'll hang out with Diddy if I have to.
Right, exactly. Which we're seeing more and more, right? These things eventually they surface. But you know, there's that kind of artist / entertainer. And then there's people that I think do get there organically. And I have met people who have had tremendous success that are still well-grounded people. I can't, you know, I don't want to blanket everybody, because there are some good ones in there. But I think that you see it a lot with, particularly, I would say, the young female musicians or entertainers, right? There's a formula there. They're introduced, right? So like they're young, they're hungry for success, they're innocent enough, they look nice, the record label signs them, they're introduced to the world as this young, clean-cut girl with nice, clean music, and they earn the parents' trust, and the child starts to grow up with the girl as their idol. And then 2 or 3 albums later, she's becoming a woman, and she's exploring her sexuality, and she's, you know, having that influence on families, and the mom has, you know, the parents are groomed in this sense to trust that artist, right? Well, you know, she's just, you know, we listened to her over here, so let's support her now. But I think a lot of that change, that shift in that girl happens from behind the scenes, right? I think that you have a lot of people. We've seen it with Britney Spears, and we've seen it with Miley Cyrus. Yeah, sure. Like the list goes on and on. It's almost the same thing over and over again. But you have people behind the scenes who are whispering things to these young ladies, who are saying, and I think this happens across the board. Once you reach a certain level and you have a certain amount of influence, all these backroom suits they come get closer to you, and they say, hey, you know, you should really think about doing this or doing that. And then eventually, I think, whether they intend to play the game or not, they might just find themselves in that club, right? And that's the way it goes. But
yeah, Ariana Grande came from Nickelodeon, and you're seeing all the Dan Schneider stuff coming out now. It's filthy.
Yeah. And that's the crazy thing, right? Like, we know that Hollywood is full of terrible, like, pedophiles and all these stories that you hear. We've seen time and time again what happens to child actors, and we hear of their trauma later when they've grown up. And it's the same thing in politics. Like, we have all these influential people leading our world who are horrendous individuals. Yeah. And we allow it. And it really shows you our complacency as humans, that we don't step in and say, you know, have standards. I think that's the thing. We have zero standards for our leaders now. That's pretty obviously with Biden and who our current leader is. But when you look around the world, across the board, everybody who's in a position of influence, not everybody, but most people, I'd say 8% of them, 99% of them, are not any people who should have any influence whatsoever when you really start getting down to it.
Yeah, it's like, the standards are low too, but also people's memories, like their long-term memories. It's like, okay, that happened. Now there's a new thing. And then people get blinded by, the money, the power, the success, the fame. So even though,
Yeah.
you know, parents potentially, or even the artists themselves are like, well, this thing happens, but that's not going to happen to me,
Mhm.
potentially.
Mhm.
Or, you know, they are just groomed for that, and they'll do anything to become famous. So
Mhm.
there's, you know, there's variables to this, but I just think people just forget, you know, they see a news article, a headline, maybe they read it. Okay. And then they go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
There's
Well, people
there's
are,
an apathy.
yeah. And I think people are they're very attached to their media and their heroes. And
Mhm.
so, you know, once you lose that, it's very freeing, right? Like for me to go through watching my heroes not speak up and show me that they really meant what I always thought they believed in. um, you know, you struggle with something there because, oh, they made that movie I like, or oh, they made that song that I like that I played at my wedding. Like there's something there that ties you to them, so you forgive them. You know, even if they come out later and you find out that, you know, they're a serial rapist and drug abuser, dealer, whatever it may be that's on their plate, people still they struggle because they know them from over here and they have this perspective of who they are, right? And that's why we're constantly, I think, you know, society is forgiving these people, but also, yeah, there's a ton of distractions to keep us from focusing in on it. That's why I continue to stay focused mainly on the COVID era right now, because it's like, look at all the stuff that's happened since the beginning of COVID that's been pummeled our way, you know, between world wars and border issues, border crises, and looming financial crisis, all these things that are just pumped in our face every day, especially having phones. We see so many things that are, it's designed to get us to forgive and forget so quick.
Yeah, for sure. And like in the same way, like just because like you dislike one thing about someone doesn't mean, you know, you throw out everything of who they are and what they did. Just because you like one thing about someone doesn't mean you have to like their entire character and everything they've ever
Right.
done or said, you know? And
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the nuance gets lost often,
Yeah.
you know, even like I'm happy that what you said before, like not everyone in Hollywood is a fucking blood drinking satanic
Right.
pedophile, you know.
Right.
It's,
Yeah.
it's easy to want to throw the label out, you know.
Yeah. I think a more basic way to say it is just, I look at them now as just people. I've
Mhm.
taken them off their you know,
Yep,
pedestal, and I just look at them as people. You know, even if I was to meet Paul McCartney today, and who was my big hero, it wouldn't hit me the same way. I'd just be like, oh yeah, you're sort of that guy. Yeah, you made a lot of great songs, but I wouldn't like, if I had that interaction 10 years ago, it would have been like, oh my God, like what do I say to you? You know, that sort of like
well, it's disillusionment,
mhm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. But
Which
we're all
is
just people, man.
We're all just people, you know. It's
Yeah.
like I'm not going to sit here and say I'm the perfect human being, and there aren't aspects to
Right.
me that are less than ideal. And I think you know we get blinded by that when we like over admire someone, or we put someone, like you said, on a pedestal. Like we forget the fact that they're human beings. Like they
Yeah.
probably say fucked up shit sometimes or do messed up stuff. You know, of course, there's levels to it, but
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
we had
man.
a guest a couple of weeks ago, Dale, who used to say, you know, just another bare bum in the shower. They're just another bare bum in the
That's
shower.
great. Yeah, it's true. You know, I think it's finding that balance, you know, because there's plenty, like that's what we're all sort of seeking is inspiration from one another. And so when we are inspired by one another, that's very exciting, you know. But also you have to, you know, be very conscious, I think, right now to sort of cap it so you don't let it dictate your emotions in other circumstances.
Yeah, you have to be discerning, man. And also with all these different types of people, you know, their actions, you know, impact, you know, show their character. So like you see artists saying certain things that you're like, I could never stand for that. That means something, you know. And
Yeah.
you know, I've thrown people off their pedestal. I mean, I was acting for years and training as an actor, and I was like, I would always see every single movie that came out. Like all the top Hollywood, anything that was up for Oscar, I had seen them. I mean, it's been years. I'm like, I have no idea who's nominated. I don't even know what's going on. I just don't have that same like
Yeah.
that like, oh, I have to watch every award show and I have to see all the movies, and I just don't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
If Yerasimos moves his camera slightly to the other wall, you'll see his topless Tom Cruise photo there.
Well, listen, I
Wow.
like Tom Cruise as a movie star, like I do.
Yeah.
I mean, for whatever,
Mhm.
I enjoyed Top Gun. Anyways,
Yeah, I mean that's the thing though. Like we all have sort of these ideals. I think that's the thing. We see ourselves in certain, when you have a craft and you start to create goals and you see those goals being accomplished in others and it gives you something to shoot for. It's just I think that, the way society is and the formula that's presented to us is that they've become false idols, that formula has now been mastered in a sense that has not, in a way that it hasn't been mastered before in society. When you look at the last 100 years and the idea of, a teen idol and what that means to kids, like I think by the time Elvis rolled around, and then once you had the Beatles, uh, it was something was revealed, right? To people in the shadows, right? Something that made them go, oh, we can do something with this. And then then go from the 60s to today, look at the difference between, how a teen idol has shifted, right? It's
Yeah. Not to mention like the whole Tavistock interjection, with some of these artists. Like I think, it's like videos of like people just watching like the Beatles on stage or even Taylor Swift today, like nothing being said and people just having these visceral reactions, just crying their eyes out as if it's a god, standing up there.
right.
I only do that when Brad's performing.
Hey, look, I want you to connect with the show,
Yeah.
but I don't want you screaming, throwing your panties on stage before I even play. That's
Not again, Erasmus, okay?
yeah. Last
Yeah,
once
man.
was enough, man.
Yeah, sorry, dude. That Music is Sky performance in the yurt was just, it did it for me.
Yeah, it's funny though. Like I did show, like my kids have seen footage of the Beatles, playing at the height of Beatlemania, and my kids are so confused by it. 'Cause they're like, why are they crying?
Yeah.
Right? Like they don't understand it. But kids are still doing that these days. You look at a Taylor Swift concert, and they're going berserk. But I do even think it's beyond another level now. The level of idol worship. But I think going back to what we were saying earlier with the two avenues, that avenue is going to get louder and louder, and try to retain what it has. It still has the attention of a younger audience, and I think that that's what the media is trying to capitalize off of, because it's a long game effort. If you can get them now when they're young, then all of those ideals and the agenda that's piped through our media continues to carry into the next couple decades. So, but you also have a generation like us who grew up sort of seeing that. I mean, 80s, 90s kids had the best pop culture ever, but now we've sort of woken up to it. The programming behind certain things and seeing the behind the scenes antics that maybe weren't very cool. So, we're sort of waking up with that. So you have this battle going on of waking up and staying asleep. And it's crazy. That's just what time we're in right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like the allure of like, the artist and like the magnetism is much more potent when you're younger, you're more so likely to project that. Like kind of as you grow up, as you start to know yourself, as you start to ground a bit, it's not as easy. But yeah, there's definitely like a concerted, intentional effort to make that as magnetic as possible, I believe, while they're young and while they're so immersed.
I mean, it's always about, and if we want to say it's always about going after the children or the teenagers. It's like this where you're more easily programmed and you can establish certain belief structures in a child. I mean, all the advertising to children with like the shittiest foods, and that's why I think parenting, is so important. How do you protect your child, and how do you keep them safe from all these institutions that are trying to hijack their minds and their bodies?
Yeah. Like think about like the We Are the World and the Bob Geldof and the Band Aid, Live Aid concerts, like huge programs and experiments, in my opinion, all that shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that, I don't know, a lot of that stuff now, like, yeah, you look back on it and you can't help but overanalyze a little bit of what was happening. And they're trying to repeat it. It's almost like they've lost. I think they've tried to do something like We Are the World, like, 6 or 7 times since then, but the talent, the caliber of talent isn't quite there in the song. But they keep sort of recycling these things to see if they can make it happen again. And it's just not sticking anymore. So, that's where we're at right now, is all the same tricks that worked the last, 50, 60 years in pop culture. They're not sticking anymore.
Yeah. Have you been following, I don't know if you follow James Blake, but recently he's been making some pretty potent points about, how musicians can actually capitalize on their own music. So I want to read you a couple of tweets and I want to have a discussion and get your thoughts. The first one is, something I keep seeing is, if you're lucky enough to go viral, just use the exposure to generate income some other way. Then he says musicians should be able to generate income via their music. Do you want good music or do you want what you paid for? The second one is, if we want quality music, somebody's going to have to pay for it. Streaming services don't pay properly. Labels want a bigger cut than ever and just sit and wait for you to go viral. TikTok doesn't pay properly, and touring is getting prohibitively expensive for most artists. So, like, I want to pose the question to you: how feasible is it as an independent artist to make a career, in music today?
Yeah. It's changed quite a bit. When I started out, like I said, the idea was you get a record label, and that was still the thing. Over the trajectory of my career, the internet has become this incredible tool that you can use. When I started out, it was just before MySpace, and MySpace came around 2004. And I had a lot of exposure through that. I became on their charts, like the #1 independent artist on MySpace worldwide. Wow. And I used that as, it's crazy looking back on it, especially when MySpace means nothing to at all anymore, right? But at the time it was huge. I mean, this was before you could, post your music on Facebook, and we had, YouTube wasn't quite there yet. So MySpace was the place. But it opened up this world of possibilities that I was able to sort of, accumulate fans and say, well, where are they? And then plot out my first real tour leaving my home state of Texas was actually a fruitful endeavor, which didn't used to be the case. When back in the day, you would go and do a little tour and lose money and play to, a couple people in a bar, and then you'd come back through later and hope they come back with a few friends, and it was an ongoing process. This was a new tool where you could go like, wow, most of my fans are in Pittsburgh. I should make a date there. And you go there, you play to a pretty full room, and you go, so these tools have been in place, and they're really, they've enhanced themselves tenfold over the last, decade and a half or so. And so, you can make it as an indie artist these days, but all these tools that are at our disposal don't pay anything. I still try to, let people know the best way to support the music is by buying a physical copy of it. And I think that it's more important now than ever as well, because digital music can be altered or taken down, or all digital entertainment sort of facing that right now. But everything that's digital, that's yours online, is you're just renting it. But when you actually own the physical copy, you have it and it's yours.
It seems there's such little incentive because of the accessibility problem with physical music, So like for someone to go and make that leap and purchase physical music, it almost feels like it's like a altruistic kind of donation kind of act. It's not like there's real utility in there for them. I think that's a big part of the issue. Like, everything's practically free,
Right. Well, the experience has changed, right? So like when I started out, like back in the MySpace days, and I was having that success, we also had LimeWire and Napster, and I remember speaking out then saying like, hey, you know, when you download my stuff from Napster and LimeWire, I don't make anything. So this struggle that musicians haven't, you know, have in getting their royalties and streaming and making what they should make for their art has been going on a long time.
Yeah.
And when I said that, I was a bad guy. You know, I remember getting pushback of like, well, you're just in it for the money. And, you know, and it was like
classic liberal programming, you know?
Right. And but like the value of music was depleting fast. And because you can get it over here for free and you burn it on a CD, and then you've got your own mix CD of the songs that you like. And we all did it, you know, like I can't say my hands were clean from doing it, but I kind of used it in the sense of I was previewing it. And if I really liked it, I would go get the music. That was my justification to it at the time. But since then, you know, it's progressively become, you know, the experience of listening to music has changed. I have a record player behind me with a bunch of records. I love to put on a record and play it and listen to it and have it playing. I don't, you know, a lot of people nowadays, it's thumbing through. I've got a curated playlist that tells me what I want to hear, and I don't have to think about it. But some people want to be immersed in it. And that's where the physical copy comes in, because especially if you have lyrics in there and stuff, it becomes a whole other thing. You have it, it's tangible, you're playing it, you're not skipping from one song to the other or just waiting for the chorus so you can sing along once and go to the next song. But attention spans have changed, you know, thanks to TikTok. You know, people want the
15 seconds, the best.
You got 15 seconds to make it, right? And that's it. So it's a weird thing to balance right now. You know, my music is, the music is half of it, and then the video portion is the other half of it. And I think they both go hand in hand in helping tell the story I want to tell through my art, and it keeps the attention, you know, there. But it also, I mean, you know, people can still download it and post it somewhere else, and, you know, you don't see any of that, or YouTube, you know, will restrict it anyway. I've had plenty of videos demonetized or taken down. So there's a lot of challenges at hand. But you can make it. You know, you look at a guy like Tom McDonald. He's doing what I was doing with MySpace, you know, back in 2006, but he's got a lot of better tools at his disposal to do it now. And he's on the Billboard charts and doing stuff like that. So the examples are out there. It's just, there's a lot of struggle in the way from just. Totally.
So like I mentioned, so James Blake, he posed these questions, then a month later, a few weeks later, just recently, he's come up with this idea. I think he's collabed with some platform. It's called Vault. I don't know if you've heard of it. So basically, it's a subscription platform. So your music's not going to be anywhere else except on Vault. And the customer exchanges $5 only per artist they're interested in. And to me, this is kind of interesting, because it feels like the people that you're connecting with, it's a very intentional act that they're going to listen to the music. The music you put out isn't just going to be watered down, you know, in the noise and, you know, into the ether. And think about it, like you can collect 100, 1,000 artists, 1,000 people who really dig you. They're willing to support you. They're willing to pay $5 to listen to your music, you know. And
Is that per month?
Yeah, per month. You know, it's $5,000 per month is, you know, probably better than 95% of what most people could probably, you know, hope for in going through the actual like journey, you know. And so, like I mentioned, like with capitalism, like there's products and there's ideas that are going to come to the fray, which are going to challenge and cater to a different kind of demand. And yeah, it's something that I feel like needs to shift, you know, with music. And when I saw it, I thought it was pretty interesting. You know, I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, that's what's changing right now is the artist-fan relationship, and especially when you're an indie artist. You know, I'm not looking for the passive listener. There's not much there, you know, to help me move forward. But the people that really get what I'm doing, like I would much rather make $5 off of a fan per month who really believes in what I'm saying and just saying like, look, I like what you're doing. Here's $5 every month. Like that's great, because that, you know, one stream is 0.0006 cents or something like that. So you think about how many streams equates to $5, you know, that's a much better route. That's the same thing as sort of saying like, look, you know, I'm just going to buy your CD for 10 or 15 bucks. You would much rather have that up front. It helps the artist on a much greater platform.
Yeah, totally. Snoop Dogg the other day, he said he received less than $45,000 for reaching 1 billion streams on Spotify.
Yeah.
1 billion.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So is Vault like kind of like an OnlyFans, but for music?
Yeah,
in a sense?
basically, man. Basically. You know, and you know, I mean, it's not going to be the only place to listen to music. You're not going to spend $5
totally.
on 100 artists and spend 500. But for people that you're genuinely into, independent artists, you want to support, you can pick a handful and spend 20, 25 bucks, you know, and I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. As long as the platform is
accessible.
Pro free speech, and because like Bandcamp was the go-to platform for indie artists for a while, and they removed my entire catalog last year.
Wow.
Without giving me any warning. I had been on their platform for I don't even know, over 10 years. And one day I woke up, logged on, my entire account was erased, all my songs. I couldn't access any sort of my data or anything. Didn't know if they owed me any money. And I found out shortly after that they did the same thing to Tim Pool's catalog on there. Wow. And then I found out they did it to a couple other like-minded artists and individuals on their platform. And, you know, which was ironic to me because it was the indie platform that's supposed to be cool that ended up doing this, you know, going the censorship route. Meanwhile, Apple and Amazon are still hosting my stuff, and the bigger platforms, you know, haven't had a problem with it yet. But yeah, I mean, those are the avenues I'm talking about. I think Volt's a great idea, and you know, I'm going to have to look into it.
How's YouTube been for you in regards? Because I know we got deleted off YouTube, and obviously mutual friends of ours and people we know have been deleted. So I'm curious how you navigated that.
So YouTube has been an interesting experience because, yeah, I've been on YouTube since 2006, and in the last 4 years have run into all sorts of things. Like that was one of the first things that really showed me like, oh, censorship and suppression is real, right? Like I'm now experiencing it, because when I put out Sad Little Man, when I put that video out, Glenn Beck shared it on his show, which caused an enormous spike in my views. And that evening, I was getting these messages from people saying, hey, I was trying to find your video and I couldn't find it. I was searching for it and I did my own search. I couldn't find my own video on YouTube. And I was like, oh, wow, they actually removed it from their search, you know, results. And so that was the first one that really woke me up to that. And I've had videos, my video for Gates Behind the Bars, which is about Bill Gates, that's been removed completely. I've had plenty of them demonetized. The reasons that they give are the funniest. That's the thing about it. Like Sad Little Man was hidden because it was medical misinformation, which really, it's like, that was eye-opening to me, was that they weren't just censoring information. Now they were censoring art, and they were interpreting that art for you. Right. That was now the realm that we are in. They're interpreting the art for the viewer and deciding who gets to see what. And that's happened with a number of things. Like I've got a few videos that are just protest footage of people holding signs at events that have happened. And they have demonetized those based on what is on the signs in the videos. And I'm like, you know, to what extent does this stop? Right. Like if you can take a real moment in time and film it of people in a group, and there's nothing like the video I'm talking about is called I Will Not Be Leaving Quietly. And I have another one that's similar to it called Fight For You. Fight For You is a song about protecting our kids. And it's people walking through the streets, hugging, holding signs. There's no fighting. There's no violence. But demonetized because the signs, you know, signs that say stupid stuff like freedom, right? Like you can't get more basic than that. Things like kids are not science experiments, things like that. So we're charting like it really is like dystopian era stuff where we're just like, what is this slippery slope we're sliding down, and how do we stop it?
Mhm.
And I tend to lean more into it. Each time it happens to me, I kind of go, well, what can I do next time to push the buttons? Because I don't let it bog me down and go, I anticipate being removed at this point.
Yeah.
And YouTube has gone from, my YouTube views and subscribers are going up to, well, they're just going to take it down anyway. It doesn't mean anything to me. So I might as well just put it on Rumble or something like that and push traffic there. But, you still upload to YouTube just because, I think, because the more eyes that see it, and when you can compete with, if it does get attention on a mainstream platform like that, it just calls more attention to your message. So you just work with what you got and try to poke through little by little.
Yeah. I want to talk about your personal creative process a bit. Like, how do you kind of, I guess, in your own day-to-day foster an environment for inspiration to come through and to be creative and follow through with inspiration when it comes? And just, you can share a little bit about your own personal process with creating.
Yeah. It's changed quite a bit since I became a dad. And so you used to be able to just get an idea and sit and hone in on it for a couple hours if you needed to or whatever. Now they sort of ideas come to me in spurts, and you get an idea for a title and you just add it to the list and come back around to it. But my family's first, my kids come first. So, I'm juggling that life every day of just sort of being a dad, number one, and then trying to get work done that needs to get done, whether around the house or whether it's making music and stuff like that. It's kind of like, but I'm still moving in here in my brain. So I'm just always creating. And sometimes you get a moment and you sit down and the idea just flows through you.
Yeah.
And you tap into it. I think the biggest difference in how I create now than pre-COVID era is, number one, I have a spiritual partnership with God that I didn't have before, where, God help us all came out of prayer, came out of sitting saying, what do you want me to say with my platform? How do you want me to, use my talents to connect with people? And I had not really taken that approach. It's very inward and ego driven, prior to that, in a way where you sort of go, well, I wrote this song about breaking up and I hope somebody connects with it, but it's a much more bigger thing. So it's a spiritual partnership now. And I have a lot more patience with it, where I don't let the ego drive me and say, well, people are expecting me to say this, or people are expecting me to have something new out and I need to get something out. I let it happen just organically. That's how each song happened. Since I started these songs, I put a song out and let the inspiration come when it finds me. And when it was done, it was done. And then you put it out, and, sometimes there'd be months between a song. Sometimes there'd be weeks or a few days. Sometimes you write 2 or 3 songs in a day and you go like, whoa, I had a really good day. So, it's just like being a painter or something like that. You have a canvas and you're just trying to make that picture however long it takes. And I think the main thing for me is just being patient with that flow and not trying to, push it, because I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, now he's just, saying what he thinks he wants us to hear. So and I still struggle with it. Like the last song I put out was in October last year, and it's now March, the end of March. And I've got some stuff in the works. It's just taking a while to get there. But, part of me still struggles with that. I got to get it out. But, if you can calm yourself down and trust the process, then you just go with it.
I totally hear you, man. Do you ever struggle with I wish I had a bigger budget? It's create a video in a different kind of way, or or my art needs to be. I'm sure you're more seasoned now, but You know, it needs to be, it's not perfect yet. Like it needs to be perfect, you know, and like I need to tick all the boxes completely. Like the vision needs to be complete before I can share this and move forward and move on from this, you know, project.
Yeah. That used to be me to my detriment. It was like my own, you become your own worst enemy when you really hone in on perfection, because I had a group of songs early on that I couldn't let go of, and I put them on several albums, right? And thinking like, I've got to make it like I would record, like, I'll give you an example. I had a song called Better With You. I recorded it at home, acoustic version, very raw. The formula wasn't even there. It's just like, and I put it out, and it got shared all throughout LimeWire back in the day, and Napster and stuff. And that was really getting out there. So I recorded a version of it for an EP, and then that version of it ended up on MTV's Laguna Beach back in the day, a TV reality series. Got me a lot of exposure, like my first big break, but I didn't feel like that was the version, right? And so went back and recorded another version. And, you know, the point I'm getting at is I ended up with I don't know, 4 or 5 different versions, thinking like more people need to hear it, but it's just not quite done yet. And became my own worst enemy because I'm circling around this one song without growing. And then I listen, and the moral of the story is now I listen back to all of them and I go, it was never done. It was never going to be done. And I could do it better now. You know what I mean? So I've been able to take that now and, you know, deliver something. Did I capture the moment, right? Did I capture a moment? Did I say what I wanted to say? Is it perfect? Probably not. But I'm not going to harp on that because I know
what's perfect in art, you know, like what is
well, and the thing that I love too is about like a lot of the music I grew up listening to in the 50s and 60s. There's imperfections throughout that stuff all the time, and that's what makes it unique and special when you can hear, you know, somebody say something in the background or a guitar scrape against, you know, whatever. There are little stories that make that recording unique. And I've learned to sort of just embrace that and let those sort of things happen. And a lot of the songs that are on my Silent War album are very much that. They're just performances in the moment. And did I capture a special moment that I feel comfortable with? And that's good, and it's done, and I won't look back on it with regret. I'll just know that I did my best at that time.
Yeah, I think you learn to trust your intuition more as an artist as to when something's ready. You know, when the take is good enough. You know,
right? So to speak. Is it ready to go for other people? I think is you know, will other people appreciate what this is? Not do I, you know, is this the absolute most perfect version of whatever this is that I'm trying to create? Because you'll look back on it the next day and realize like, oh, I could have done that differently or whatever. But I don't harp on that stuff as much as I used to. And I really have learned to embrace the imperfections. It's something that I really enjoy about art, and not just, you know, what I do, but in other people's.
Yeah, totally. So interesting, like as an independent artist, you know, having to be the artist, be the producer, be the video maker, be the marketer. You know, you're putting on so many different caps. Like for me, it's like, you know, trying not to let like the entrepreneur like creep in on the creative process, you know, and it's like, but this needs to get heard by the most amount of people in the perfect time, and you know, the perfect this that. How do you kind of grapple with that? And like, do you have like a release strategies, like going into releasing music, or is it just, you know, this thing's done, I'm going to put it out there, up to God, whatever happens, I'm on to the next.
It's kind of a balance like that these days of just putting it out there, which really is satisfying on my end to know you just sort of released it into the wild and something has happened with it. You know, all these songs, like speaking out, saying what I was saying, start going back to God Help Us All. I didn't know who was going to share it. There's no marketing campaign behind it. No one would have put that out, but it found its listeners, which is very gratifying to know. You released it just faithfully saying, "Here, world," and not only did it find listeners, but it created a whole new community that got what I wanted to say. And each song sort of did that and created it on its own, which is a beautiful thing. But as far as like, you know, an example I had pre these songs was I was doing during the 2 weeks to slow the spread when everybody was home and everybody remembers we were all hanging out, whatever. I was doing a series of not protest of parody songs. I was just sort of like making these quick little videos, and I did the first one I did was called "We Didn't Spread the Virus," which was a parody of "We Didn't Start the Fire." Yeah. And it really cheesy, but it like took me 10 minutes to write. I set up the camera on my kitchen counter, played it just as a goof, and it got 1 million views inside of a week, right? And I was like, nothing in my entire career could I have spent less time on to get that kind of result.
It's like a fucking joke. It's like a joke.
Right. So, you know, that was educational to say the least. And so, you know, I wouldn't, you look at the entire expanse of internet content, and there's those kind of videos of just a 10-second viral clip of somebody holding up their phone on a whim, and all the way to somebody who spent the last, 6 years creating a documentary that's finally ready and they've perfected it and now it's out to the world. It's all equal now, and you just do the best you can and put it out and see where it goes. But I do send it to certain people now within, our community to say, hey, I've got a new song out. I do try to sort of still make a little press release around the day. But, it's not like I pay for ads or anything like that on Facebook. I don't know if they would let me anyway. So, but I don't have the budget for that. But, I just I enjoy the position that I'm in. I enjoy the challenge of putting something out now and just seeing where it goes and how can I organically sort of help guide it to another level, to take me to another level. So yeah, it's just such a a kaleidoscope of tools and experiences of just like anything goes these days.
Yeah, got you. Yeah, man. To me, bro, if you're sitting here in front of me as an independent artist with 3 children and music is your primary source of income and you're able to feed them and sustain yourself, like you've won in my books, bro.
Thanks. Yeah, and that's the thing at the end of the day, like no matter how much pushback I get from like trolls online or people that, attack me, I'm like, I'm doing what I love. My family and my kids love me. My world is great over here. Like there's nothing you can say that's going to bog me down. I've been doing this since I was 18. Somehow I found myself here, right? And not many people can say that. And so, you just keep plugging away at it. I think everybody can do that. You just have to have faith and try to balance it. I'm not saying there hasn't been struggles along the way,
of course.
But you just keep doing what you do. Yeah.
Even just to have a creative freedom is a luxury, and to be able to say that, hey, I've got creative freedom. I'm able to take time and create value through being creative, like that's riches right there.
Right.
That's wealth. Most people, they might not be walking a financial tightrope, but like what space do they have in this one single life that they have to express themselves creatively and finish a creative project? Like,
right. Well, that's right. And that's like that's the thing that I see online every day is like people are still caught up in what the idea of wealth and success is. And like, to me, our currency is time, the time that we give one another, the time that we devote to our family. That's and then wealth is family, right? And so, those are the things that matter. But like when people are like, they come at you and they're like, well, you'll never be as big as Taylor Swift. It's like, that's not success to me. She's, in her 30s, she's single, she's childless. Great, she's got wealth and fame, but like, what does that mean? So, the layer of success, I don't know, and it keeps you focused on what matters, you know. But most people, I think a lot of people have this idea that it's just wealth and fame or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. I have to say, listening to this and, getting to know you a little bit when we hung out in Acapulco and just sensing and feeling your heart and your spirit and who you are, like I'm blown away that the programming can go so deep in people's psyches where someone can look at you and be with you and say, you're dangerous. No, like, like not to bring it to that, but it's just like, it's just to highlight for everyone, all of us listening, like how we have to, own ourselves and own our minds, because like that, something can come in there and co-opt your thinking, your behavior, for you to look at someone that you've loved and respected for decades and be like, you're bad. You're dangerous. You're a threat to society. And that's the one thing that I hope, well, I'd love for it to never happen again. But like, this is the huge lesson for people that have maybe woken up a little bit, 10%, 20%, 30%, is to just be mindful. Be mindful of what you consume, who you're listening to, and what impact they're having on you. Because, it kind of breaks my heart because I've heard so many stories of that and I've received it myself. And anyways, man, thanks for being you. Thanks for putting out the music that you put out. I'm excited to see where this ride goes.
Yeah. I think on the other side of this is a really great time, to be alive for as much as like, as dark of a time as it's been and weird and just nonsensical. Just there's this layer of froth that's sitting on this beautiful time to be alive that I can't wait to get to. And I do think that we get there. I don't know how long it takes to get there, but the examples that I've seen on my own journey show me that it's possible. It shows me that we're on the right track. It's not going to be easy. Some days you feel like you've accomplished something and we've made great strides. Other days you feel like we haven't done anything, but we're heading towards, I think, a really good time to be alive, as long as we all just keep doing what we're doing. And I think the thing is the thing that's between a lot of us right now is this screen and social media. And when somebody that hasn't seen you in a while, that maybe has known you for a long time, has only connected with you through a screen, it's easy to brush you off as something that you're not, because that conversation isn't there. You and I, we can meet at events and talk and get to know each other's hearts. And we know that. But for a lot of us, that those relationships have been pulled away through that and this time. So, the more we get back to real life and reality and those conversations, I hope that we can eventually mend the gap, and we'll see where we go. But I do think that on the other side of this is a great time.
Here, man. We're here. We live in it. There's so much beauty in the authentic path, man. Like, to me, like, the great time, the beautiful experience, never going to be all rainbows, butterflies, fairies, one season kind of living. And, I think what we've all kind of discovered the past few years is really discovering the beauty in the darkness, in the struggle, in the difficulties, in having to step up, in having to discover our own power, in having to become more intuitive, use more discernment. I think, yeah. It's
I enjoy that. Like, it's weird to say that, but I enjoy the difficult moments now, or the darkness, and just examining it and saying, what does this mean? And how do we utilize this to create a better moment out of it? And so,
what is this
that's
teaching me?
Right. And that's what we're on the cusp of. I've mentioned it a few times, but these events, that Confluence, Jam for Freedom, Acapulco, Music in the Sky, like, these are where we can, connect beyond the screen and look at our future and figure out ways to get to that, to that little beacon of good times. Yeah.
Totally, man. Brad, it's been such a pleasure sharing this dialogue with you, man. Thank you for being who you are. We appreciate it so much. You're going to be performing at Confluence in April, at Music and Sky in June. And besides that, please let our audience know like the best ways that they can hear you, support you, connect with you, etc.
Yeah, so the website's 5timesaugust.com. It's all spelled out, FIVE, 5timesaugust.com. Got records, CDs, and stuff on there for you, and that's the best way to support the music. I don't endorse anything. I just have the music, so that's the best way. Share it with your friends, watch the videos. You can follow me on Twitter or any of the social media websites at 5timesaugust, and I'm out there doing what I do. So
awesome, man. Looking forward to connecting at Music and Sky. And dude, if you have a rap verse on any one of these songs, just hit me up, all right?
Awesome. Will do. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much.
Take care, man.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Stay tuned for the wrap up. Man, just real people doing real shit, living a real life with, juggling, all the different variables, having to fill the different cups in different ways, but, always staying rooted to that cornerstone of truth, integrity, knowledge of self. Like that's my kind of person right there.
Yeah, man. I didn't know about Brad until Music and Sky last year. He was performing, and I think there was a weather issue, and so I think he was supposed to perform on the stage. Instead, he was moved into there's like a massive TP / yurt, whatever you would call it, in the back area, and there's like a little like fireplace in the middle, and everyone kind of gathers around. And I was there for the performance, and man, I was blown away. Just the whole environment was late at night, the lighting, his voice, the acoustic. I mean, it was incredible. I was like, who this person's such a beautiful musician. What he was speaking about obviously aligned with a lot of the things we stand for. So yeah, I had no idea in the journey he had as an artist before that, the level of success, until obviously I got to know him a little bit better and look into some of his stuff. But the integrity and the strength that it takes to go against your peers, your industry, the threat of losing money, and to just go, hey, this is what I believe in, and I'm going to speak that truth and see what happens. And that's the invitation to everyone. I mean, you all know what Joel and I are about, what we talk about, with our on the podcast and our program. Look in the mirror and be really clear with yourself. Who am I? What do I want? What do I stand for? What do I value?
What are you passionate about? What inspires you? Where is inspiration live for you?
It doesn't have. You might not be a musician, but what is that thing that lights up?
Yeah,
that excites you.
Creativity is so much more than what you might traditionally perceive as art, whether it's painting, music, book, whatever it might be. Creativity can be imbued and poured into every single moment of your day. Can be a creative act, can be a creative process, building a business, creating value, playing with your kids, connecting with your partner in a different way, cooking a meal, going for a walk and observing nature in a different way, looking at a tree in a different way, connecting with the water in a different way, and I think this is something that we really need to build upon in our own lives, to have a little bit more softness, bring about more of our unique essence, and just have little more moments of vulnerability in our lives. I think makes us so much richer and deeper as a person, so my encouragement for everyone listening is to, how can you let creativity and let inspiration in, just a little bit more.
Yeah. Regardless of what you think, people will think about it as well,
yeah.
Where are you giving your power away? Where are you not doing the things that you want to do, not saying the things you want to say because fear has taken a hold.
Yeah, and even for like, you know, the social media content creators that are listening, like, how is your content being skewed and filtered by your idea of how it might be perceived, or what your audience has become accustomed from you? You know, like, is it still true to you? Is it still real to you? Is it what you really want to say? Is there something else that wants to come out, but you're worried about losing an audience, or getting some comments, or people not digging it or not liking it? Like, fuck that shit. You know, be you, keep it real. Let creative and inspiration always remain fresh to where you currently are. You know, your life is not one repeated season. You're growing as a human being. The world is constantly changing. The seasons are constantly changing, and that all of that is going to affect the texture of what comes out of you in a different way. And I think those who really have longevity, like, they honor that.
I hear you, man.
Yeah. Guys, Brad's going to be performing at Music and Sky in June in NorCal. And this is the first time I mentioned this on the podcast, but so am I. I've been deep writing my first album in a decade. Last November, I got the creative surge, first new music in 3-4 years. And I'm very, very excited to perform to the audience, to meet some of my colleagues, my peers, fans of this podcast. Like, this really is a dream come true for myself in many ways. I, you know, think back to my life in Sydney, pre Here for the Truth, pre meeting Erasmus. And if I'm that person and I think, hey, Joel, in a few years' time, you're going to have new music and you're going to get to perform it with a live band, so people who really appreciate it and are receptive to it and get it, like, no, man, I would never have believed it. You know, in, you know, California, being from Australia, 25 hours away. But here we are. So I'm pumped. We're gonna in the show notes drop our personal Music and Sky link where you can get 10% off tickets. Erasmus and I, you know, you're gonna get to meet us in person for the first time together. We're gonna rock the stage and, you know, do our inspirational bit as well. So it'd be absolutely awesome to see as many of you as possible and to get to connect with you, and just, you know, thank you for listening and supporting us as well. And just, you know, so nice to connect in person and to be in one another's energy. You know, it's a completely different thing.
I agree. I can't wait. I love these events. You know, anyone who follows me on social media, I post about them. And like Brad said, like, online stuff's super important, but being in person, connecting with one another, seeing one another, hugging one another, it's pretty special. So I hope to see you all there, or maybe not all of you, but a bunch of you.
Totally. Take care, guys.
Smoking mirrors, I'm seeing through the illusion. Waking up in a time they think you're in a delusion. Somebody set the alarms, cause they be too busy snoozing. I'm in a DeLorean. Fast forward and never